Welcome back into Live Now from Fox. I'm Austin Westfall. Let's get the latest on the Israel-Hamas war. And for that, we bring in Blaise Misztal. He's the Vice President for Policy at the Jewish Institute for National Security of America, otherwise known as JINSA. As always, Blaise, it's good to see you. Let's get straight into the news. As usual, there's a lot to cover. Benjamin Netanyahu told Joe Biden on Thursday that he has decided to send a delegation to resume stalled negotiations on a hostage release deal with Hamas. A source in the Israeli negotiating team, speaking on the condition of anonymity to Reuters, said that there was a real chance of achieving agreement after Hamas made a revised proposal on the terms of the deal. So, Blaise, we've been here before. These types of reports are encouraging, but we've seen so often that they don't materialize into an actual agreement. Is there any reason to believe that this one could be any different?
Well, good evening to you, Austin, and happy 4th to you and to your viewers. While I would like to be optimistic, particularly for the sake of the hostages and their families who are waiting for them to come home, this is something that we've seen time and time again, not just from Hamas in this war, but from Iran. This is their usual negotiating playbook, which is every time that world opinion seems to coalesce that they're being obstructionist, that they're not negotiating in good faith, that it's time to put more pressure on them, they'll hold out just a sliver of hope. They'll say, yes, maybe we will agree to this one condition that you have, while still not agreeing to the full deal, while still making a whole host of other demands. And in that way, they can prolong the negotiations while making sure that the weight of the world doesn't come down on them. This is the way that Iran negotiated the nuclear deal with President Biden, and it's the way that Hamas has negotiated for the last 8 months. So yes, good news if this is one step closer to a deal, but I have my doubts about Hamas's ability to actually release the hostages and make good on their promises.
A question about the deal itself. We remember over a month ago, Biden announced that 3-tiered proposal in a White House address. Is this the same proposal that they're still working on? And if so, do we know what has changed about it over time?
Yeah, I think it is still largely the same proposal. The sticking point that apparently Hamas is now relenting on is Hamas demanded that any deal include Israel agreeing that the deal meant the war was over, as opposed to the three-part structure that President Biden's proposal has, which has at first a 6-week pause and then negotiations towards potentially extending that. But if negotiations fall through, it would allow Israel to resume the war. And in fact, one of Israel's demands is the war does not end until Hamas is destroyed. So yes, there can be ceasefires to allow hostages to be released. Yes, Israel is willing to release numerous prisoners, many more prisoners than Hamas has hostages, but the war will not end with a deal. It will end with Hamas being destroyed. And now Hamas is apparently saying they're willing to agree to the 6-week temporary ceasefire and not demand that the war end immediately. But we'll see.
I want to talk a little bit about Hezbollah. The Associated Press says that Hezbollah launched over 200 rockets on Thursday at several military bases in Israel in retaliation for a strike that killed one of its senior commanders. The AP says that the attack was one of the largest in the months-long conflict along the Lebanese border. So, Blaise, tensions do remain high, but we haven't quite gotten to the point we've been fearing, which is an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah. How much longer can they trade jabs before something gives, before something bigger happens?
At the rate it's going, not much longer. I think the war between Israel and Hezbollah is not a matter of if. At this point, it's merely a matter of when. And with these tit-for-tat escalations that we've been seeing, we're getting closer and closer to the possibility of a miscalculation by one side or the other that really tips this over into a broader war. But I think the more significant thing about this these launches that we saw today, over 200 rockets and drones launched. And if we look back, we've actually seen a significant increase in all of June in terms of the launches, is something that I heard when I was in Israel last week. from Israeli military officials, where they told us Iran is resupplying Hezbollah more than the United States is resupplying us. And I think we're seeing that Hezbollah is able to increase its fire so much that it has all these new drones that it's suddenly launching after not really using drones throughout the previous 8 months of this war. That means they're getting resupplied, they're getting fresh weapons, and they're not worried about losing their supply of weapons, about being cut off, about their stockpiles running dry. And this comes at a time when the United States, we know, has slowed or stopped its delivery of weapons to Israel. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General C.Q. Brown, told Israel, if a war with Hezbollah happens, we're not going to be there to protect you in the way that we protected and helped you against Hamas and Iran in April. And I think those signals only reinforce and re-embolden Hezbollah and make it think, well, maybe we have the upper hand here. Maybe Israel is too weak to go to war. And if we keep attacking, we can force Israel to back down. And that's what makes the situation so dangerous, is that Hezbollah believes that Israel has lost the backing of the United States. And that really increases the chances of an all-out conflict here.
I want to ask you a little bit about the fighting in Gaza. Israeli forces bombarded several areas of the southern Gaza Strip earlier this week in what could be part of a final push of the IDF's intensive military operations. Israel's leaders have said that they were winding down the phase of intense fighting against Hamas and would soon shift to more targeted operations. So, Blaise, what have they said about why they're winding down? Were they waiting to make a certain amount of progress before using that kind of language?
Yeah, so when I was in Israel last week, what I heard was a really useful analogy to understanding how they think about the problem in Gaza, which is they said, look, think of Hamas like a big boulder, and we need to destroy this boulder. How do you do that? You do it in steps. First, you blow it up into smaller chunks, but they're still big rocks. Then you have to grind those down into gravel. And then you take the gravel and you grind that into sand. And that's basically what they're doing with Hamas's military structure. Hamas was not a terrorist group. It was a terror army. It was organized like a regular military with brigades and battalions and companies, big fighting structures. And so what Israel has been doing over the last 8 months has been breaking those down, destroying Hamas's 24 battalions. There's now maybe 1.5 battalions left in Rafah, maybe one and a half left in central Gaza. They're finishing those off right now with their major operations that they said will hopefully be over by the end of July. And then what will be left are smaller pockets of resistance, sort of the gravel pieces. And that allows them to deal with those with smaller units of their own in less intense operations. And then they break them down further, and hopefully there'll be only small groups or individual terrorists left. And then it becomes a matter, hopefully, for more policing and law enforcement action while you build up some sort of alternative government for Gaza that replaces Hamas. But this major combat operation is really blowing up that boulder of Hamas, those major organized fighting units, into smaller, disorganized cells that can then be gotten in much easier fashion with counter-terrorist operations.
One more thing before we go. As the IDF does wind down the intensity of their fight, how do you think the search for Yahya Sinwar will fit into the IDF's tactics? What you're looking at on your screen is the last time we saw him, I believe. It was recorded underground on October 10th. How do we think he fits into future plans, Blaise?
Yeah, well, it's certainly one of the reasons that this phase of the operation has taken so long, basically 8 months to do major combat operations, is because of the combination of, first of all, the tunnels under Gaza. The IDF told me that however long it takes to clear a section of Gaza above ground, it takes 10 times longer to clear it, to check the tunnels, see what's underneath them, check for booby traps, search for Hamas leaders underground. And then in addition to that, you have the hostages that are being held that Israel is searching for and obviously trying to avoid hitting. And so one of the reasons operations have taken so long and been so meticulous has been because of the search both for Hamas's leaders and the hostages underground. I think the hope is once the combat operations have largely succeeded, once Israel controls or is able to patrol a lot of the territory above ground, if they haven't yet found Sinwar, they'll be able to do a more precise search underground and go through any remaining tunnels and really put the squeeze on Hamas's leadership and hopefully force them out.
All right, Blaise, we'll leave it there for now. Take care.
Thank you so much, Austin.
Let's slide away for a commercial break. We're back in 2 minutes.